happening now. Breaking news, one way or another. President Trump is vowing to get billions of dollars for his border wall, even if the government shutdown lasts a year or more. Mr. Trump confronting Democrats over at the White House, even as support for his hardline position is eroding within his party. Declaring an emergency? The president says he's considering going around Congress to build his wall by using his emergency powers to tap into military funding. We're told that national security officials already have been discussing the possibility. Extending Mueller's jury. A new sign tonight that the special counsel has more work to do in the Russia investigation. Why did a federal judge order a secret grand jury to remain in session? And framed as a spy, new intrigue in the case of an American citizen arrested in Russia and charged with espionage. We're learning more about his criminal background amid questions about whether the Kremlin set him up. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following breaking news. President Trump going to new extremes in his border wall demands 14 days into the partial government shutdown. Tonight, he's warning the standoff could last for months or even years. If he doesn't get his way, Mr. Trump says he could go around Congress and get the wall built by simply declaring a national emergency. The president speaking to reporters after talks with congressional leaders that Democrats called contentious. Neither side is backing down as 800,000 federal workers aren't getting paid. Also breaking, a federal grand jury used by Robert Mueller in the Russia investigation has been extended, suggesting the special counsel may be seeking more indictments. This hour, I'll talk with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, a member of the Judiciary Committee. And our correspondents and analysts are also standing by. First, let's go to our White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, the president sounded hopeful about negotiations to end the shutdown, even as he was making some new threats.
He did, Wolf. He seemed to make two arguments while speaking to reporters in the Rose Garden, at times saying that he felt that meeting was productive with Democrats and that this could be wrapped up pretty quickly, but then going to saying that he'd use his emergency powers if he had to, and the government would stay shut down for years if it needed to. Wolf, one thing was clear is that they did not come any closer to breaking this deadlock.
Yes, I have. And I can do it if I want.
President Trump amping up his threats over funding for his border wall tonight, declaring he's considering using emergency powers to build it.
I may do it, but we could call a national emergency and build it very quickly.
After a 2-hour meeting with congressional leaders that Democrats described as contentious, Trump threatened to leave the government shut down for years if it comes down to it.
Absolutely, I said that. If we have to stay out for a very long period of time, we're going to do that.
Asked if he still owns the government shutdown, the president said he's no longer calling it one.
I'm very proud of doing what I'm doing. I don't call it a shutdown.
On the campaign trail, Trump promised his supporters a concrete wall paid for by Mexico. Now, with the government shut down over a demand from his administration that the American taxpayer fund it, he says it could be made of steel. So how can you say you're not failing on that promise to your supporters?
We just made a trade deal. And we will take in billions and billions of dollars, far more than the cost of the wall. The wall is peanuts compared to what the value of this trade deal is to the United States. As far as concrete, I said I was going to build a wall. I never said, I'm going to build a concrete. I said I'm going to build a wall.
Even though he did.
No windows, no nothing, precast concrete, going very high. Let's see about a little higher than that.
But the president continued.
Steel is stronger than concrete. If I build this wall or fence or anything the Democrats need to call it, because I'm not into names, I'm into production.
Thank you very much.
Trump claiming the recently renegotiated trade deal with Canada and Mexico will pay for the wall, even though it hasn't passed Congress yet, and he didn't explain why the government is shut down if USMCA is paying for it. A redo in the Rose Garden after Trump took no questions from reporters during his first appearance in the briefing room yesterday. The president describing his meeting with Democrats as productive, though that's not what they said.
We really cannot resolve this until we open up government, and we made that very clear to the president.
Friday ending with no solution to the government shutdown in sight. But the president said he's assigned a team to huddle with Hill staffers over the weekend. Asked about his message to those federal employees who won't receive a paycheck during the shutdown.
Those people, in many cases, are the biggest fan of what we're doing.
How do you know that, sir?
All right,
Do you have evidence
please,
to support
Major,
that?
go ahead.
And while hundreds of thousands of federal workers are going without pay during the partial shutdown, new documents reveal that hundreds of the president's political appointees are slated to receive annual raises of around $10,000 tomorrow, including cabinet secretaries, deputy secretaries, and even the vice president.
Mr. Vice President, will you turn down the raise?
Mike Pence vowing not to take one today, and Trump said he's considering asking his cabinet to forego theirs. After several rank-and-file House Democrats brought up impeaching the president, Trump said he discussed it directly with Speaker Pelosi today.
You can't impeach somebody that's doing a great job. I said, why don't you use this for impeachment? And Nancy said, we're not looking to impeach you.
Now, Wolf, we're learning a little bit more about what went on during that 2-hour meeting with the president and congressional leaders. Someone in the room said that the meeting wasn't so long because it was incredibly productive, but because the president was essentially making the same arguments to those Democrats that he made to reporters from the Rose Garden earlier today. We're told by sources that the president came into that meeting, he immediately launched into this hard-line stance of $5.6 billion for his wall, and he was not negotiating anything lower. The Democrats made their arguments, but we're told by sources that the president flatly rejected those arguments, and in the pretty blunt words of one person, quote, there was no progress made. So, Wolf, that doesn't give a lot of hope to people who thought that we could be a little bit closer to ending this shutdown.
Yeah, good point, Caitlin. Thank you very much. While Democrats are standing firm against the president's border wall demand, some key Republicans are breaking with Mr. Trump's shutdown strategy. Let's go to our senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, is either side feeling real pressure right now to back down?
The leadership certainly is not, Wolf, but impatience is growing on Capitol Hill about this shutdown and about the fact that there appears to be no end in sight. Two Republican senators who are up for re-election in 2020, Cory Gardner and Susan Collins, both have indicated they support reopening the government and continuing the discussions about border wall funding on a separate track. That's the same position that Democrats in the House took yesterday on the first day of the new Congress, passing two pieces of legislation that would reopen the government, the shuttered agencies, and a separate one to open the Department of Homeland Security up until February 8th and punt on that issue of the border wall. Now, on the House side, for initially 5 Republicans voted for that Homeland Security bill, and 7 Republicans voted to open up the rest of the federal government. And one of those Republicans, Pete King of New York, made it very clear to me that it's time for the president and the Democrats, but particularly the president, to negotiate.
And I just thought it was wrong to hold those hundreds of thousands of employees hostage over an issue they have nothing at all to do with. I think the president should negotiate. I think the Democrats should negotiate. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but I think if Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi weren't bound by their base, they'd be able to negotiate more. And the president should always be listening to the Freedom Caucus.
And that Freedom Caucus is the House Freedom Caucus, a conservative group that has been very influential in urging the president to take a hard line, which he's done so far. And on the Democratic side, there have been some concerns being voiced, including by a freshman Democrat, New Jersey Democrat Jeff Van Drew, told me earlier today that Nancy Pelosi should negotiate and perhaps come closer to the president's number for the border wall.
So she should cut a deal, essentially, yes. Even if it...
in my opinion, I would lie. And I know that there's some people in my party that don't agree, but there are people that are now not working and not getting paid. I wish we weren't. And the Republicans are digging in too much. Everybody's digging in too much. And you know who doesn't like it, in my opinion? The vast majority of the American public.
Now, despite those comments, most Democrats in the House feel like they're in a good position. They support Nancy Pelosi's position. At a closed-door meeting this morning, Wolf, I am told by members who attended, there was no desire to budge from their position. And even one very sharp Pelosi critic, Kathleen Rice of New York, told me that she supports Pelosi's position on this. So you're hearing some frustration from the Republican side, not as much on the Democratic side, and no real desire from the leadership to end this standoff anytime soon, Wolf.
Another potential problem for the president, Manu, the Democrats in Congress, they have plans to launch what could be the largest congressional investigation of a sitting president. How quickly could that begin?
Well, it's going to begin as soon as these committees start to get organized. That could happen as soon as next week, but it's going to be a slow drumbeat, a steady drumbeat. Letters are going to be sent to respective agencies demanding information, documents that they've been asking for such a long time on issues ranging from immigration to the Russia investigation to the citizenship question on the census, a wide range of things that they have not gotten answers to. And if they don't get responses, that's when the subpoenas will start flying, and that's when things will really start to intensify. But expect a number of these contentious hearings to take shape in the early part of the new Congress. And Wolf, one person to look out for, Matt Whitaker, the acting Attorney General. That's the House Judiciary Chairman's Jerry Nadler. Is one of his first targets. He wants him to come. And he told me that he's prepared to subpoena Whitaker if he does not agree to come before the committee this month. Wolf.
We'll see what happens, Manu. Thank you very much. Now to the breaking news on the Russia investigation. A federal judge has just extended Robert Mueller's grand jury. Let's bring in our crime and justice reporter, Shimon Prokopez. Shimon, does this mean that Mueller isn't close to finishing the investigation?
It's quite possible that that's what it means. We don't know exactly how long he's asked to extend the grand jury, but the fact that this grand jury has been extended, it's been working already 18 months, so many witnesses, indictments already, suggest that they are still working, and we know of at least several issues that are still before the grand jury. Of course, there's that mystery subpoena that this foreign company has been fighting, now waiting on a decision from the Supreme Court. We know people associated with Roger Stone have been before the grand jury. Paul Manafort has been before the grand jury. Rick Gates, he's still cooperating. We don't know when his cooperation is over. Presumably, he's been before the grand jury. So there appears that there's still a lot of work that the Mueller team is going with before the grand jury. And really, by every expectation, there seems to be more work that needs to get done here.
Could the government shutdown have an impact on this grand jury?
I don't think so, Wolf. Look, I think, we've asked the special counsel about this, whether or not any of the shutdown would affect them. They have said, no, that's not the case. And I think given what this grand jury is doing, given the type of work they're doing, I think they will be okay. And also keep in mind, they're not there every day. They're there maybe twice a week, sometimes half a day, sometimes just for a few hours. So, they're going in, they're hearing evidence, perhaps they're doing votes, but I don't think that the shutdown or anything like that should affect them.
Those grand jurors, they've been already doing it for 18 months. They might have to do it as long as another 6 months. That's a lot of work.
And also keep in mind, Wolf, their work could continue even after Mueller is gone because there are other investigations that are before them that are not being handled necessarily by the Mueller team. They're being handled by the Department of Justice. So those investigations could still be ongoing for a year, 6 months, who knows?
Yeah. All right, Shimon, thank you very much. Joining us now, Senator Richard Blumenthal. He's a Democrat who serves on the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. I want to get to the Russia investigation in just a moment, but let's start with the government shutdown. President Trump is standing by his demand of $5.6 billion for the wall. He says he's willing to keep the government shut down for months, maybe even years. At some point, do you believe Democrats have to compromise and come up with some offer, at least some money, for his border wall?
There is a clear path forward, Wolf. It's the path we were on when the United States Senate unanimously approved an approach that now has been adopted by the House of Representatives and would be passed by the Senate. Let me emphasize, I believe that reopening the government with full-year appropriations to all the agencies that have nothing to do with border security, and then funding through a continuing resolution the Department of Homeland Security, which would give us time to reach that kind of compromise.
But the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says he's not going to allow that to come up for a vote because the president is threatening to veto it.
And you took the words right out of my mouth, Wolf. The impediment here is simply the refusal to allow the United States Senate to vote. This Trump shutdown is wholly on Donald Trump, who wants this vanity project that he promised the Mexicans would pay for. He has failed to spend the money that's already been appropriated, that $1.3 million, only 6% of it spent on border security.
$1.3 billion.
Part of it. $1.3 billion. But the refusal to allow the Senate to vote, I think, is a major impediment, because I think that sending the bills to the White House would put President Trump on the spot, and he would have to decide whether he wants to make a counteroffer that would enable us to move forward.
It doesn't look, Senator, like the DACA issue, the Dreamers, as they're called, is on the table right now. Is there anything President Trump could offer you and your fellow Democrats that would get you to agree to border wall funding?
The president has really not been a serious or credible partner in any talks about DACA. What the Republicans in the Senate are discussing is a 3-year work permit extension, which is simply a non-starter. And there has to be serious and substantial and credible conversation about comprehensive immigration reform. So there has been nothing substantive or specific discussed as yet. The United States has to provide a path to citizenship right away for the Dreamers, and indeed a path to earn citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people in this country through comprehensive immigration reform. But so far, there's been no credible or serious discussion.
The president now says the wall could be steel, not necessarily concrete. It might be called a barrier, might be a fence. Is that a concession from your standpoint?
The president's been, again, a moving target. Negotiating with him is like trying to talk to Jell-O, as Senator Schumer said. So I think, again, extending and reopening the government so that we can have serious discussions and work out exactly what border security would be, because that's the common ground. To go back to your very first question, the common ground here is border security. We all want it through better technology and more manpower, training the border agents and allocating more of them, surveillance, sensors. The top administration officials who've come to Congress have provided no evidence whatsoever that the southern border is a source of terrorism or terrorists coming across, and the stopping of illicit drugs requires more and better surveillance at the ports of entry. The commissioners and the secretaries who've come to us over the past 2 years have provided evidence that we need better border security, and we're all for it in the Congress.
The president says that he's willing to use his national security emergency powers to build the wall if you guys continue to refuse to provide some funding for the wall. Wouldn't a compromise be better than allowing him to declare a national emergency to build the wall through the U.S. military?
The president's threats are really a disservice to the rule of law and to the American people. They undermine the credibility of his office. There's no legal theory, no credible claim that the president can make under the Constitution or the laws of the United States, like the anti-deficiency statute, that basically prohibit him from reallocating money that's already been appropriated. The Congress has the power to appropriate, the power of the purse, which was so rightly given to the Congress by the founders, and there is no evidence either of a national emergency based on terrorist threat or drug importation that would justify that kind of claim. So I think that this kind of threat really has to be regarded as totally fact-free and law-free.
Let's turn to the news on the Russia investigation with yet another extension for Robert Mueller's federal grand jury, perhaps for as long as an additional 6 months. What does that tell you?
What it tells me is that Robert Mueller has miles to go before he sleeps or stops. There are going to be more indictments in this new year, as I have predicted repeatedly. The record of this special counsel investigation is already extraordinarily substantial, and that's the reason why the judge concluded that it was in the public interest for this grand jury to be extended for another 6 months. Now, remember, he could have impaneled a new grand jury and transferred all the evidence to that grand jury. So it's a mark of this grand jury's interest in this case that they were willing to continue to serve in this capacity, which is extremely onerous for the average citizen. There are very substantial sacrifices involved, and they are a key part of our justice system. So, bottom line, I believe that we're going to see substantial work still to come by this grand jury, by the investigations in New York in the Southern District, and by the Eastern District of Virginia.
Well, listen to this, Senator, what the president said today on the issue of impeachment.
Well, you can't impeach somebody that's doing a great job. That's the way I view it. I've probably done more in the first 2 years than any president, any administration in the history of our country.
All right, what's your reaction?
My reaction is that we need to await the special counsel's report before we make any judgment about what the remedies would be for potential law breaking. And there's already a credible case of obstruction of justice against the President of the United States. And as for his performance in office, the American people can judge for themselves. But I challenge the president to direct his cabinet to donate their pay to charities of their choice. I'm donating my pay to Homes for the Brave, a Connecticut organization that benefits veterans here in Connecticut. And the hardship and the harm from this shutdown to the American people and to the dedicated federal workers, including, by the way, all the members of the Coast Guard who are on.
Okay, YouTube viewers, I was gonna go ahead and continue recording this portion of the newscast, but did you hear that? There is already a credible case for obstruction of justice here in the United States. Before I go on, I may record a segment of the next news program to cover up for the part of this one that I did not cover. Well, well, never mind, because they already went to commercial right in the middle of this one. But did you hear that? There is already a credible case for obstruction of justice concerning President Trump. I have told you today, someone said something today that made me mad enough. So mad that I cussed about it. I'm sorry for my language, but 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, the Lord is faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. I have repented of all my sins. So that's why I feel like I can tell you this, because I've repented of all my cussing today. But YouTube viewers, listen. There is already a credible case for obstruction of justice. Will you think about that? The Lord himself told me a while back that Donald John Trump is the last president of the United States. There is a video titled Last President Award on this channel. So think about that as you like, share, and subscribe. And remember, I have repented of all my cussing. Thank you.